Alright, the next step is going to be a fairly quick and easy one after all the more complex ones we've already been through. It's nice to have a bit of a break and do something that's relatively simple. So we're going to take our bag that is originally labeled Plus S04 or Subassembly 4, and that's the Extruder Mount Subassembly. So you should have 4 laser cut pieces in here. One that sort of looks like a Space Invader alien. 2 pieces that are identical that look like such. Again, just a close-up of the Space Invader. And then one more piece that looks like this. It's symmetrical. So put our bag aside. We're also going to need a little bit of hardware, so 4 of the 6/32 1/2" screws. So 4 of those, 4 of the 6/32 hex nuts, and 4 of the number 6 flat washers. You may see some instructions that indicate that you need square nuts, but the hex nuts work just fine. So there's really only one way that you can make this go together, so it's not terribly complicated. Basically, you're going to put the Space Invader into this guy here. Really only one way for that to go. And then you're going to take the other 2 pieces, and you'll figure out that there's really only one way that these things can possibly go that makes sense. And that's going to be to get it like that, and then same thing with the other piece. And again, a little bit of jiggling, since we don't have these put together yet, is going to help you get those tab and slots lined up. And just like before, we're going to use a screw and washer, and then do our pinch method to get the hex nuts lined up on the side, and then come through the front. Keeping the washer centered as much as we can, and not to worry. So we'll get that back on there. We will do the other side and screw, washer, and then work our nut through the slot, pinching it together, placing the screw in from the other side, getting it to engage, and then getting it tightened down a bit. So now we have the top 2 pieces here connected to the tops of the sides, so now we need to get the bottom portions, which is going to follow the same sort of process. Screw, washer, like I said, this is one of the simpler sub-assemblies, so think of it as a nice break from what you've been having to go through and what you will still unfortunately have to go through for some of the later steps. And the final set of hardware for the Extruder Mount Subassembly lined up. And tighten down. And not too tight, we don't want to break anything. But one final check now that we've got things lined up and assembled. The last little twist on a few of these, and we now have our assembled extruder mount. Fairly simple. Again, this is the S04 subassembly in the bags. Yours is probably not green like mine, but the pieces are the same. So only 4 pieces and 4 sets of hardware, and we are done with this. So moving on to the next step. Alright, real quick update since the last step where we built the simple little extruder mount. Got that out of the way, and since then I have been working on the actual extruder. This is what the finished product looks like. Now the reason why I didn't actually do a build video of this one is because the one that Brooke did, that's available on YouTube and on the Printrbot wiki, is actually pretty good, and most of the pieces fit together fairly well without much carving and drilling and that sort of thing. I think some of the older pieces were a lot worse, but these seem to go together pretty darn well. I didn't have any trouble getting this together at all. So at this point we've got the extruder motor with the extruder assembly, and of course the UBIS hot end is mounted in there with the wires ready to be connected. One thing I did not mention on the base is these little clear vinyl tubes. Now the purpose of these is to actually go on the motors for the Z-axis. That's these ones on the outer edge. So we've got one here, and then the one on this end. Now I've already installed this one here just to make sure that it was going to work out okay. A lot of the videos and forum talk about having to trim these down, but the ones I got were actually pretty short. If they're too long, then just take a pair of scissors or some diagonal cutters and cut them down. The idea is that you want to slip them on the motor shaft without going too far down that it's going to rub on the bottom of the motor, or the bottom of the shaft, top of the motor, and you don't want it to be too far up that it's going to be flush with the top of the shaft. So as long as you got somewhere in between so that the Z-axis coupler has something to grab onto, then we will be okay. But other than that, it's a pretty simple process, but I did not want to neglect to mention that as part of the overall base process. And as you can see, it's a pretty snug fit, but it's easy to get on there, and the ones that I received in my kit are just the right length, not too long and not too short. So that's pretty much it. So just wanted to update you on the extruder portion before we get to the next step. Like I said, the video that Brooke did is pretty sufficient for doing the actual extruder assembly, and he's done enough of these that it's a pretty simple process. So check that one out for the extruder assembly process, and we will move on to the next step.